Thanks for spending just a minute thinking about God's truth with me today. Today we focus on the truth of Romans 12:3. The Apostle Paul spends the first 11 chapters of his letter to the church at Rome explaining the gospel. In chapter 12, Paul begins to explain the practical applications of the gospel. How are we supposed to live now that we have come to know Jesus Christ and received his new life by faith? In 12:1, Paul tells us the first thing we need to do is to offer our bodies to God as living sacrifices. And in 12:2, Paul tells us not to be conformed to the patterns of this world any longer. Instead, we are to be transformed in how we think about life. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And now in 12:3, Paul tells us the first place to focus when we start to think about life differently. For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. It's time to start the clock and break it down. One key area we are called to think differently about is ourselves. The Apostle Paul instructs us, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to. The instruction here is against pride. Pride has no place in the heart of those who follow Jesus. Instead, we're called to use sober judgment when we evaluate or think about ourselves. What does that mean? Sober judgment refers to looking at ourselves through God's lens. Whatever the Lord says is true about us is what we adopt when we evaluate ourselves. We use the faith he has given us to evaluate ourselves according to his truth. When God says we're sinful, we agree. When God says he loves us, we agree. When God says he will accomplish his purpose in our lives through the power of his Spirit, we agree and submit to his Spirit's leading. You get the picture? Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. Use sober judgment and view yourself as God views you. The change in how we think about ourselves is critical to our effectiveness as followers of Jesus. As always, I'm interested in your feedback. Please comment below. Pass this verse along to anyone in your life that may benefit, and don't forget to like and subscribe. But remember, one key component to the transformation God calls us to is how we think about ourselves. What's your opinion of yourself today? Serve him well. God bless you.